Before we jump into these fantasy football rankings for the quarterbacks, I promised at last episode because I failed in the last episode with some pregnant wife advice. So I figured I'd have to lead off with it right away. And my pregnant wife advice for the week is if you go to a bachelor party, do not call your pregnant wife at 1 in the morning asking for a ride when she needs to wake up and go to work in the morning.
Yeah, it seems like a good idea, though.
Are you going to be able to drink after what we just did this last weekend?
You know, some of us can actually keep ourselves under control, and it also helped that I didn't show up till fucking 8 o'clock, and you guys are already drunk.
I loved the fact that your first beer was in one of the busiest intersections of a town of 60,000 people. You're just like, screw it, man. I'm drinking in the street.
Yeah, well, I got to fucking catch up, so I was smashing beers on the side of the road.
Well, you ready to put one down right now?
Always.
Well, then let's get loaded, because this is the Loaded Box Podcast.
Pathetic opening, where we never finished first because we finished last.
How do you figure? We coordinated our beer openings at the same exact time.
Mine was terrible, though. It sounded like it just splashed the water and didn't make the noise, or the beer and didn't make the noise.
Well, we can edit that out. We'll get a new one in. But as I mentioned, this is the Loaded Box Podcast. I am Ben Morgan. That is DJ Primo. We are recovering from the bachelor party, as we talked about last week. But this week, DJ, we're finally breaking into our positional fantasy football rankings. We're starting with the QB2s, which means basically those outside of the top 12. So those ranked 13th through 24th. And then kind of rather than dissecting each player like a lot of fantasy rankings podcasts do, we're going to try something a little different here. We're going to bring up scenarios and questions and just kind of off the cuff things about these players heading into the 2019 fantasy football season. So right now we're going to break them down. I'm going to list them off for you. DJ's on the website as well, but just so you know the quarterbacks we're talking about, starting at 24 and working our way up. We got Sam Darnold, Matt Stafford, Mitch Trubisky, Josh Allen, Kirk Cousins, Lamar Jackson, Jimmy Garoppolo, Dak Prescott, Big Ben Roethlisberger, Tom Brady, Jameis Winston, and coming just outside of the QB1s is Jared Goff. So, DJ, of those listed, which ones do you consider? Do you have like a pick or a favorite for finishing actually as a QB1 this year? Like, you got to pick one of those guys to be your starting quarterback, going to finish as a top 12 quarterback. Which one are you going with and why?
Holy shit. I didn't know what we were doing beforehand, so I'm just getting into it.
It's that damn bachelor party.
Well, what rankings am I looking at? What rankings are you looking at?
Oh my gosh, we're going off. I can't believe that this is DJ to an extreme. Remember that one episode a little while back when we were only going to talk about NFC players, and DJ brought up 5 of his 6 players from the other conference? We're going right down that road again.
Well, I mean, our Loaded Box overall rankings are
not what we're going off of.
Oh, what are we going off of?
Average draft position.
Oh, ADPs. Okay, I thought we were going off of our rankings.
This is why you tune into the Loaded Box Podcast. It's because we go to bachelor parties, DJ kills brain cells, says he didn't drink all that much, and then realizes, oh shit, yeah, I drank more than I thought I did.
All right, I'm good to go now. What was the question? Restart over, rewind. I thought we were, it makes sense to go off of our own fucking rankings.
Yeah, you can incorporate that in there, but if you'd have listened to my messages from earlier in the day, you'd have known exactly what we were doing. So of those quarterbacks that I just listed, you got to pick one of those guys that's going to finish in your top 12. Who are you going with and why?
I am going to go with, and I had this in my head a hot second ago. Oh, it's you're going to hate it, but it's going to be my guy Jameis Winston.
Oh my gosh, really?
Yeah, dude, this is the guy that I was talking about. He's going to be the Matt Stafford of 2-3 years ago. This guy is going to air the ball out. He's going to throw it deep. The ball's going to be in their air like a punt for 3 seconds at a time. They're going to be behind, and he has the weapons to just throw it downfield too. So, I said this over and over again, but he's going to throw interceptions. He's also going to throw a fucking shit ton of yards and a lot of touchdowns. I'm 100% on the Jameis Winston train.
My next question for you that I put on the agenda for us so that you could prep, but obviously you missed, is going to bleed perfectly into this because I said, which quarterbacks ranked 12 to 16 are you definitely avoiding? And my answer for that was Jameis Winston because of everything that I said last week. But let's rehash this in case people didn't hear the episode last week. How can you be confident in this quarterback who's had really good weapons in the past? He's had all of these guys. He's had Mike Evans. He's had Deshaun Jackson. He's had the duo at tight end. He's got all of these guys at his disposal basically his entire NFL career. And has he really been like fantasy relevant, a guy that you think you can rely on every week starter and finish as a QB1? I am like an emphatic no. I'm definitely avoiding this guy.
He absolutely. Mike Evans and him put up monster numbers together a couple years back. Cameron Brate's his touchdown beast. If he got to play a whole year last year, I think you would have seen obviously better numbers. We're looking at half a year's numbers from him last year. This guy, I don't. He's a good enough quarterback. He's better than Ryan Fitzpatrick. That's stupid. But like I said last week, he's better than fucking Carson Palmer. Like he's playing with Bruce Arians. I'm on the Bruce Arians just throw it deep train. Like that's what he does. He just throws the ball deep. He's gonna let him throw the ball deep, and that's where Jameis is at his best. So that's where I want him.
Well, I think that you're probably going to end up tearing my quarterback that is currently outside of the top 12 that I think is like a shoe-in to finish as a QB1 because my selection is Dak Prescott. He's, according to his ADP, he's currently quarterback 17, going as the 7th pick in the 11th round. I'm not kidding you, DJ. I'll go 2 rounds early to land this guy because if I'm getting my quarterback in the 9th or 10th round.
Wait a second.
What?
Wait a second.
Say it.
Why would you go 2 rounds early to grab a quarterback when you can keep getting depth at position and people are going to avoid him? Like that's like I can see doing that for a running back and a wide receiver to make sure you get them, but for a quarterback like Dak Prescott, you're going to move up 2 fucking rounds to grab him.
Here's the thing. I don't think I'm the only one on this train. Like I think this is going to be a thing. No, people see that ADP and they say, "Man, if I can wait that long, I am going to jump all over that." And if I wait until the 9th or 10th round, I'm already waiting all those rounds and grabbing like backups for my running backs and wide receivers. I'm not going to take a tight end likely before that. So if I can get Dak in, the 9th or 10th round, I will jump all over that. He has never not finished as a QB1. And this is probably going to be the best that he's ever done. He's got that contract looming. He's going to want to get paid, man. He's going to anything. Dude, we've seen people ball out on it. Yeah, some people it doesn't, some people it does. But he's got the full year with Amari Cooper. He's already got Zeke and the offensive line taking pressure off of him. Another receiver is going to step up. I'm not saying it's going to be like Randall Cobb. I don't have a ton of faith in him. But Michael Gallup, second year, up-and-coming wide receiver. He has enough weapons. He'll get it done with his legs. The dude is a surefire top 10 fantasy quarterback. I don't get why he's going this late.
I mean, he doesn't get into those areas because he can throw the ball really well. I think lots of the stuff that faults up guys that aren't very good quarterbacks like RG3 and maybe even Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen last year is that they put up numbers with their legs, which faults up that score because we put. I mean, 4 points for passing touchdown, I think is kind of a bullshit thing to do, but that brings down the quarterbacks, and then they rush and they get a 6-point touchdown. Plus, you got a point for every 10 yards. So I think that probably is what helps your argument.
Yeah. Well, and here's the thing though with Dak. He's not the quarterback. He'll get it done on the ground. He's not going to rely on running the ball 10 to 15 times like a guy like Lamar Jackson is doing and risk getting hurt. Like he's not a high risk getting hurt kind of guy because at the end of the day, he is a pocket quarterback. He just happens to have scrambling as a strength.
No, but he's also a pocket quarterback who, if he doesn't see, he needs the read to be there, and if he doesn't, then he's running.
Ooh, I like that. That's fine.
Yeah, but he's not. I mean, that's going to work against him at some point. And I'm just not on his train. Like he's not a good quarterback. He can't support more than one pass catcher. Like he just can't. He's not good enough to do that. So if you're going to think that he can barely support one pass catcher, like this Amari Cooper thing was an outlier. I don't think you're going to see that this year. It was a guy coming to an offense that people had no idea what to do. It was one of those things where you get a brand new quarterback, don't know what to do with him. It was kind of unexpected, and they didn't think they'd have to worry about Amari Cooper. But Dak Prescott, I'm just not. And other thing is, I'm in drafts with you. You probably can wait 2 rounds late and still get Dak Prescott in our drafts.
Well, I've said this a million times too. Do I want Dak Prescott as my favorite team's franchise quarterback? I'm 50-50. Probably not. But do I want him as my fantasy quarterback? Yeah. And you brought up not being able to support 2 fantasy receivers. Well, you know why? He gets it done running as well. He doesn't need to. I don't need him to fully support two receivers that you're going to start on a weekly basis. He can support Cooper. He can support Zeke. He can support himself. That's all he needs to do. Surefire quarterback one.
But I think scouting him is so fucking easy. It's like run, read, and go. Like they're people and defenses are gonna figure it out, and I think it's happening. It's gonna happen like right now, and that's why they don't make. That's why they're just not like that good of a team in general, and those numbers will come down.
It'll be interesting, but man, he's my guy. So I answered mine.
You hated him last year.
Yeah, I did. But guess what?
Hated him.
Hey, things change. Things change. People grow. People mature. People get smarter. That's what happened to me.
Well, I'm the smartest.
I answered the question about quarterbacks ranked 12 through 16 that you're definitely avoiding with Winston, so that I can bring everyone up to speed with the options. I mean 13 to 16. I'm sorry. Your options here, the guys that you're definitely going to avoid, are Jared Goff, Jameis Winston, Tom Brady, or Ben Roethlisberger. Of those guys, which one are you definitely avoiding?
God, this is a tough one. I can't say Tom Brady just because he's just Mr. Consistent. I am worried about him not having Gronk, but I also think Gronk may come back at some point in the season. I'm going to have to go Roethlisberger for the simple case that I just don't know how he's going to be without Le'Veon and Antonio Brown both for an entire season. The offensive line is good. The running game's there for support. It might be fine, but Roethlisberger, like, he can come out and throw 7 interceptions in a game, and he'll throw 5 touchdowns the next game. And I'm worried that inconsistency, his body's breaking down. He's one of those guys that once it breaks down, though, it's done. Like, he's not going to be Tom Brady. He's getting beat up. You see him with the ice packs out there. That's the one guy I'm definitely way more leery on just because his fucking body's broken. He's losing weapons. He's coming to the end of his career, and he just doesn't have. I don't see him as having the longevity of the Phillip Rivers and the Tom Brady. I think he's about it, like right at the very end of his fantasy stardom.
Yeah, that was actually I had a Big Ben in one of my other questions for you, and it was, can he be relied upon as a team's starting fantasy quarterback without Antonio Brown, without Le'Veon Bell? And it's funny because it seems like his entire career he's had these kind of guys, these playmakers, and he was never really looked at as like the top quarterback or like one of the very best. Maybe there was a year or two where he was drafted pretty high, but I feel like he's always been in that like 6 to like 9 or 10 range. But he's always been a quarterback one. So you always try to think like, okay, when is it time to pull the cord? I can't rely on this guy anymore. Honestly, I think it almost is this year because of like what you said. He'll have some boom weeks. Like Juju is a good receiver. He'll get it done. James Conner will get it done. He'll have some good weeks, but it's going to be so spotty that there's no way I could rely on him as like my starting quarterback. So if you want to do the wait and draft a quarterback thing, I think you have to get someone else like a Phillip Rivers, like a Jimmy Garoppolo, someone else that can be your weekly guy, and then take a chance with Ben just in case maybe he's not quite done yet and he can return into that QB1 status. But yeah, I'm with you. I think obviously my pick from that is Jameis Winston. But yeah, if I had to pick a 1A or 1B, it would have been Ben Roethlisberger.
Yeah, buddy.
That's where you say next.
I know, but I said yeah, buddy.
All right, I'm going to give you 3 more quarterbacks here. These are 3 quarterbacks ranked 22nd, 23rd, and 24th that you feel most comfortable with as your team's backup. Number 22 is Trubisky. Number 23 is Stafford. Number 24 is Darnold. Who you taking as a backup out of those 3 guys?
No prep, don't care. 100% Sam Darnold.
Ooh.
Not even a thought in my mind for this one. Stafford, I've made the claim that this is the year that he had a terrible year last year. I think this is the year where they're just done with him and they draft a quarterback. Going into in 2020, the Lions will draft a quarterback in the first round and plan on replacing Matthew Stafford. So he'll probably play for a couple more years, but they're going to be planning that replacement. I think he's donezo. Trubisky, I was the guy on him last year. I'm growing. I got smarter. I saw weaknesses. I saw a lot of fucking weaknesses on Trubisky. They cannot maintain if he continues to play like that. And I just don't think he has any. I just don't think he's going to go up. Sam Darnold is a guy that you look at, you see, and you see that he can be a star. I know it's his first year with Adam Gase, but I don't know. I love him. He's got Le'Veon Bell to toss the ball to. Hopefully, Robbie Anderson doesn't commit any crimes. I'm excited about some Sam Darnold. I would love to have him on my team.
Did you see the headline that Golden Tate made after a couple practices with Stafford, saying that he is the best quarterback that he's ever played with? So obviously that includes Eli Manning and Carson Wentz. Do you think he actually means that, or is that just like, dude, this is who I'm playing with? What else do you expect me to say?
Well, when did he say that?
I think it was like a week ago.
What? But he's on the Giants right now. Am I on crack cocaine?
No, you're spot on. You're spot on with that. Oh yeah, I screwed that up with my saying. I'm sorry, I said that backwards.
I got a little confused there.
But yeah, so I'm sorry. That's what I meant by that. Like, isn't it weird that he didn't say like it was Eli?
Well, I mean, yeah, I don't know. He's only played with Stafford. With Eli for like a week or something like that. But I don't know. I mean, he hasn't played with quarterbacks that have been consistently on the field either. So
right.
He probably played just as much with Nick Foles.
Yeah, his sample size with Wentz was obviously very small.
Yeah, he got traded halfway through the season.
Right. Yeah. I get my pick here though. I'm going Stafford slightly over Darnold. I tried telling you last year, man. You were on that Trubisky train. I said just jump off of that shit. You don't want any part of it. He did have like the best scoring fantasy game last year that 1 week. But we talk about consistency. Well, I'm saying the ultimate week for fantasy. He owned it last year. But man, it's consistency. And Stafford was not consistent last year. And that's what the beautiful thing about Matt Stafford, over the course of his career. Another guy like Roethlisberger, who wasn't ever the ultimate quarterback that you wanted. But man, he would get the job done for you in fantasy just as that consistent 20-point scorer. He's not going to crush it in so many weeks, but he's also not just going to have 0 touchdown games. And we saw that last year. So that's why I sort of want to take the upside with Darnold. I just think Stafford has enough left in the tank. But I'd be lying if I said I wasn't a little concerned about the weapons surrounding him. I love Kenny Golladay. I don't mind Marvin Jones. Obviously, they drafted Hawkinson. I love Kerryon Johnson. But we're talking about guys that at this point in their career are potential guys. None of them have really proven it.
And again, tight ends are useless in this with Matt Stafford. This team, have you ever just thought about the draft? This might be one of the worst drafting teams in the history of drafting for a long while here. They just don't address positions of need. They have so many weak spots, offensive line, defense, just the whole entire defense in general. They lost Ziggy. They need a pass rusher. And they go and draft T.J. Hawkinson at number 8 or whatever they had. That's just they just don't know how to draft. They just aren't grabbing guys that they need to be adding to make their team a better roster, and they're just going to keep getting worse.
It's weird because last year in the first round, I thought they were maybe overcoming that a bit. They took Frank Ragnow, I believe, the offensive lineman. And then, this year it's Hawkinson, his name is flashy right now. Everyone's mocking us there. And they just went with it. And you don't really see that too often. The consensus mock, it doesn't always happen, especially at number 8. Number 1, 2, 3, sure, it happens. At number 8, it's not always that much of a sure thing. I swear, every draft analyst was Hawkinson to the Lions, and it almost made it seem okay, it can't happen. And boom, there was no hesitation. That was the pick. That was the guy they were targeting. And I agree with you. What are you going to get out of him right now with Stafford?
Nothing.
Very little.
4 years of doing nothing and dominating for the Colts.
He's going to go the Ebron route.
Yeah.
I believe I already know your answer to my next question.
I don't even know my answer.
Well, I'm going to give you the time that it takes for me to ask you the question then. Because I don't think you're going to have to think about it too long. What percent chance do you give Lamar Jackson as finishing as a quarterback 1? He is currently, let me look this up here. He is currently quarterback 19, according to ADP, going early in the 12th round.
Well, I'm not going to give him 0%, but I really wanted to. But I will give him a 3% chance. 3% chance because he might bust out a few big runs every now and then. That's the only thing. But I also think he's going to probably just die trying to run the ball. because he's a fucking stick. Like I'm bigger than Lamar Jackson now that
Right.
I've backed on my freshman 25. So
Your first kid, 15.
yeah, exactly. So I'm really backed those on. I think I could take Lamar Jackson at this point in my life. I don't. 3%.
What I'm trying to do right now, and obviously this is like our second, and I don't want to call them tiers, but our QB2s podcast. So I don't want to get too much into the QB1s right now. But the way I kind of looked at it was I looked at the top 12 quarterbacks and said, okay, which one of these guys is going to fall out of the top 12 so a guy like Lamar Jackson can jump in? Well, I can see a guy or two falling out. I just think there's so many other guys that can jump in ahead of Jackson, so that makes his percentages go down even farther. I'm going to give him about a 10% chance. What blows my mind here, and we'll get into this in our next podcast, but the quarterback that I think can fall out of the top 12 the most, Kyler Murray is going as the 5th pick in the 8th round as quarterback 10. I'd be willing to bet Lamar Jackson has a greater than or equal to percentage chance of finishing as a QB1 as Kyler Murray.
Yeah, probably. I think he has more. They have more of a style that would allow for him to have more of successes, especially running the ball in Baltimore than they do in Arizona. Everybody's picking this team to have 3 wins, yet everybody wants to put Kyler Murray as a top quarterback. Like, it doesn't make any sense.
You could end up drafting like the best like 6 or 7 rounds that you've ever had in fantasy football. And if you end up taking Kyler Murray as your starting quarterback, I'm just going to say, dude, you just wasted whatever money you put into that fantasy league. And it's almost going to piss me off.
It's pathetic. He's not going to be good.
Before we get to the next question, let's talk about Pristine Auction real quick. We're going to be doing another giveaway very soon here as we approach the 2019 NFL season. In the meantime, we can get you an extra $5 to put towards an item that you win at pristineauction.com. Enter the code LOADED in your registration code field when you create your account. Pristine Auction has daily auctions, week-long auctions. They've got tons of stuff for all sports for your man cave. So head over to pristineauction.com, put in registration code LOADED. DJ, on to the next question. This is a guy I'm interested in hearing what you have to say because he's been around literally like forever, like our entire lives.
Can't wait to find out who
it is. This player that I'm about to talk about has been around our entire football lives and is going to outlive your child's football life. That's how long this guy's going to be in the league. Tom Brady.
I didn't even look at the thing. I just knew it right when you said that last part.
Dead giveaway. Are we overlooking Brady at this point, or is there still room that he should be considered like a QB1, a weekend starting fantasy football quarterback? Because right now, he's going as quarterback 15, so obviously in that backup tier.
Yeah, he's just gonna pepper Julian Edelman and James White and things like that, and he'll probably be fantasy relevant. I think everybody's just waiting for him to fall off. I'm not gonna if I have the opportunity and people actually aren't drafting him at this point, I'm 100% gonna draft him. He's fucking Tom Brady. I've probably been notoriously negative about Tom Brady. I think he's a really good quarterback, and I will say this over and over again, but I think he's a really good quarterback because he's in a really good system, and they are the most perfect match of all time. Like, they're fit together like the best puzzle pieces. Him in that system, if he had to play in a Mike McCarthy system or a Mike Tomlin system or something like that, he just wouldn't. He might not even be playing right now. Like, I just don't know if he'd be a starting quarterback in the league, but he's a good quarterback in with the best coach ever in like the history of football in the right system who changes consistently. So I mean, as long as he stays with Bill Belichick, you can't. I mean, he doesn't have to throw the ball downfield.
Right.
He just doesn't. He doesn't have to throw the ball downfield, and you just watch his plays. I sat there and just watched to see what they did, and it's the most simplified thing you can think of, but it's so smart. Like, there's so many rub routes for the running back that people don't realize. There are wide receivers basically screening for running backs.
Oh, yeah.
And nobody picks up on that.
Right.
They just don't. And refs don't call penalties because they're throwing it to a running back.
Mm-hmm.
They're not looking at the wide receiver. So it's so rare to get anything called. And James White gets the ball in space and has plenty of time to make moves and run. He just doesn't have to throw it downfield.
Doesn't everything you just said there, though, scream consistent fantasy football quarterback on a week-to-week basis.
That's what I'm saying. Exactly.
Yeah, that's why it's weird to see a guy like Tom Brady as quarterback 15. My one concern, I guess, is life without Gronk. That was the security blanket. That was the guy who could turn an average play into a big play. That was the red zone threat. Literally, like one of the best tight ends to ever play. What I think Brady has going for him here, he's had to play without Gronk before just because of all of Gronk's injuries. So it's not going to be completely new territory for him. But here's the strategy, man. If you can get our guy, Phillip Rivers, a little bit later, swing back around and get Tom Brady as your backup, like, yeah, you got a couple of fossils at quarterback.
Yeah, who cares?
One of those guys is going to be fine. Doesn't that seem like a sort of like a foolproof draft strategy?
Yeah, you have two guys who are potentially going to put up big numbers and not get injured. They just don't get injured.
Yeah, we finally saw eye to eye on one of these. I like it.
It's so weird that we're talking about these old school quarterbacks still being so dominant, but they just are right now. Like, it's awesome.
It's crazy. I think you may have kind of already answered this next question, but because you already talked about Darnold. So talk about the other guy in your answer. I'll reword it because it was going to be: would you rather have Sam Darnold or Josh Allen on your squad? But since I know that your answer now is Darnold, would you even contemplate having Josh Allen as your backup? Say if you did take a quarterback a little bit earlier. Let me hit up the ADP right here. Let's say you took a guy like Carson Wentz in the 7th or 8th, or a guy like Russell Wilson. Would you come back at some point in the 12th, 13th round and get a guy like Josh Allen, or are you just beyond Josh Allen right now as a fantasy prospect?
Josh Allen's somebody I'll be able to grab off the waiver wire at some point if I want to, because someone's going to drop his ass. I don't want him on my team. He's not. I can grab a quarterback like him, or like him off the waiver wire if I want to at some point in the season. I'm telling you that right now.
I think, and it's not like his ADP is super high, but I think what people are going to see is those rushing numbers. But end of the day, I don't think that's what Josh Allen is. I think a lot of Josh Allen's like rushing yards and touchdowns came off of just what were broken plays. And rather than take the sack or try to get to the next read as a rookie, it was a little bit of panic and just like, oh, here's a hole. I'm going to exploit it, and I'm going to run for 100 yards in 19 consecutive games and run for 10 touchdowns and just put up these crazy stats. And it's not like it's inflating him super high in ADP, but there is some of that hope there where people are like, man, I can wait and get a guy like Josh Allen, who latter half of the season was a legit quarterback one because of all that rushing. But I'm with you. Let's say someone takes him. First 3 or 4 weeks of the season, he doesn't get a lot of his rushing totals, and he has to rely on that arm. That's going to be so inconsistent that I think you're right. You might end up seeing Josh Allen dropped at some point, and these people that are so high on him, I think that's going to be one of like the biggest mistakes that you can make in this fantasy season.
Hey, remember the time that the Bills were the worst team in the NFL and then they beat the Vikings?
That was the That was the coming up party, and I believe that was the week that I told every single one of our listeners that whatever your rent is, if it's $300, if it's $1,300, bet it on the Vikings. And if you listen to me, you probably aren't even listening to this podcast anymore because you can't afford the internet.
They hate you.
Let's move on to this question. I'm not quite sure where you're going to land on this one. But based on their current ADPs, which one of these guys are you more likely to end up with? You got Jimmy Garoppolo going as the second pick in the 12th, or exactly a round later as the second pick in the 13th, Kirk Cousins. Which one are you going with?
Oh, this is such an ugly question.
I love this question. I don't mind these guys.
I hate Kirk Cousins like with a passion, just in general. But Jimmy G is so like unknown that I'm just not like I have not ever bought into Jimmy G yet. Like I just haven't. I was the guy that told you to fade the Niners the first 3 weeks. He happened to get hurt, so I happened to be right in general. But they also did lose. They still didn't cover the spread without him.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, Kirk Cousins is he's real life trash. He's fantasy semi-relevant. Not in the right system in Minnesota. I was in a big discussion in a message board today about it, doing a mock draft with our boy Mikey and his, whatever the name of their podcast is.
Nice promo.
Shout it out. But I guess I'm gonna have to go with Kirk Cousins because I know more about him, and he has Kyle Rudolph, Stephon Diggs, Dalvin Cook, and Adam Thielen. So like he has guys that you can even like make Kirk Cousins look better than what he is. Where Jimmy G is just so unknown, and I just can't buy into it. And I know Kyle Shanahan and that offense is something that Rodgers and people around the league love and say that works. But I'm just not. I'm not gonna grab something I just don't. I don't know. I just have no idea. The guy threw a ton of interceptions when he did have the chance at the end of that year or end of his first year in San Francisco, and I just can't sit there and think that he's fucking Tom Brady until we see it. Everybody's crowning a guy that we haven't watched play.
Right. Do you think that this next statement is a fairly accurate assessment? Jimmy Garoppolo has the higher ceiling. Kirk Cousin is the safer week-to-week pick.
100%.
And that's why I think at this point I'm a little bit more. I guess I feel safer taking Kirk Cousins at that point because, like you said, Jimmy Garoppolo. There's so much unknown. He had that 6-game sample size where he just lit the world on fire. They didn't lose a game. Like he was throwing touchdown passes. And so many people bought into that. The 49ers bought into that, rewarded him with an awesome contract. And then he got hurt. And the Niners just kind of were just like this team that no one really paid attention to last year. I love what they've done around him. I love Kyle Shanahan. I think that they have the opportunity to make I don't know if they're going to have a stud fantasy receiver, but with Kittle, with Goodwin, with Pettis, with Deebo Samuel, the 3 running backs they have, they have the makings of all them guys being pretty legit. But Jimmy Garoppolo being the number one guy who benefits the most because he's the one that's going to be distributing that ball. That's what Matt Ryan was doing with Julio Jones and Mohamed Sanu and their 2-headed running back. He had a really good fantasy season that year. He was an MVP that year. So I'm not saying Garoppolo is going to be in that class, but that's your potential. That's your ceiling. But man, I think Kirk Cousins has that ability to take the next step this year. That offensive line is going to be healthier. Dalvin Cook's going to be better. Another year with Diggs and Thielen and Rudolph and Irv Smith Jr. These are guys that are going to be fantasy relevant. Maybe not the tight ends, but Cousins is going to get his fantasy points on that as well. I'm not opposed to either of these guys. If I have to pick one though, I got to go Cousins.
Jimmy G, I mean, again, you named a shit ton more question marks, right? The whole wide receivers, Marquise Goodwin, Donnie Pettis.
They're all potential guys.
All the running backs, we don't know how Tevin Coleman and Jerick McKinnon are going to work. It's just a bunch of guys I just don't know about. I just don't know, and I just don't like that. We say higher ceiling, but what is that ceiling based off of? We don't know. We're just guessing. People are basing that high ceiling off of that 5 games.
Yep.
Jimmy Garoppolo played 2 fucking years ago. That's like Fortnite. I don't know. That's just forever ago. It's ridiculous. So it's we're basing it off of 5 games that we saw of a team that wasn't good that had to just throw it around anyways. And it gives me nothing. There's nothing I want to. I don't even try to think about those games because it doesn't tell me anything. So Jimmy G is. To me, he's not a guy I want to touch until I see. So if he dominates this year, great. If he doesn't, great. It won't have him on any of my teams.
I love that I was able to pigeonhole you into picking a Vikings quarterback there.
Yeah, that was awful.
I think that was my real goal with that one. In the podcast when we talked about how we were doing these rankings, I really wanted to get to our rankings, and that's what I'm doing now. So I do want to apologize for the confusion earlier. But I'm just looking at our rankings now, and there's a guy that's a consensus top 12 quarterback everywhere you go, and you have him ranked 13th. And that guy is Deshaun Watson. And I know you've talked about him in the past, but for anyone who may be a new listener, give your rationale as to why you don't have Deshaun Watson currently as a quarterback 1. He's in this quarterback 2 tier.
Couple of reasons. They didn't improve up front. Offensive line, they just didn't. They're not they're gonna have protecting problems. He's a guy that has a tendency to turn it over, so he does make some dumb throws interceptions. He also fumbles the ball, and his tiny little body, I think, may break with how much he can't continue to run. Those numbers of 500 something yards and 5 touchdowns or whatever it was I don't think I'll continue because that's his biggest strength, and people are going to take that away because he is a legit run threat. Like that's part
Oh,
of his
yeah.
threat. Only guy who can consistently run for the last 10 years or whatever, 6 years, 7 years, is Cam Newton. Like he's the only guy with a body made to do that, and
Right.
he somehow can avoid the big hits as well. But he's big enough that it doesn't really matter.
And even he gets hurt though.
He does, and he's a fucking truck. Like he's a truck. He's the one guy that part of that game, part of their strategy is running. Deshaun Watson, it's not going to continue to work for him because he's going to get hurt, and then they don't have running backs. Like I don't trust their running backs. I just don't. So it's like you're not really focusing on their run game, and then now you're kind of making them you're putting them in a corner and they're one dimensional. And I just don't think you have to worry about their run game. So there's so many things that teams that you have to take away. I don't think you have to take away as much against the Houston Texans offense.
Yeah, I will. I'll talk a little bit about Watson in our next podcast because I do actually have him as a quarterback one. I'm like the general public here on this one. I don't have as much of a hot take on Watson as you do. And then I was just going to bring up one more quarterback, but I'm actually going to save that for the next podcast too because I think that could turn into a little bit of an interesting / lengthy conversation. So I didn't have any other questions for you, but do you have any other of these quarterbacks or scenarios that you would like to bring up?
Aaron Rodgers. I just had to say it. I didn't even say it at the beginning. I was gonna be like, I got my Packer hat on. I was hoping you would ask me if I'm ready to go. I feel like you usually do that.
Oh, I do.
Got my Packer hat, got my Packer shirt, and I've got a Hinterland beer, which is from Green Bay. I was loaded up.
Oh my gosh, dude! I think you're literally going to just turn into a fat chick.
I don't know what that means.
Because all girls that likes the Packers are fat chicks.
Hey now, your wife is a fat chick.
I'm not. I didn't say it. That's just a common thing I hear around this.
You calling pregnant women fat?
So I'm gonna have some pregnant wife advice next week. It's probably gonna be because I'm digging out of a hole right now.
I have a story for you that I just learned today. You want a story time?
Story time with DJ. Let's do this.
Make it really quick. So I was at a wedding recently, and there was a guy in the wedding, and he had a girlfriend there, and she looked pregnant. And somebody said that girl's really pregnant, and somebody mentioned when are you due? And she said we don't know.
What?
Blah blah blah. Turns out she wasn't pregnant.
Oh no.
And she was really angry about it, or so we thought she wasn't pregnant. She thought she wasn't pregnant. She was drinking. I go to find out just this week, maybe within the last couple of days. I was told by the groom that he called me and he goes, "Guess what? You remember that guy and his girlfriend?" I was like, "Yeah." They were like, "She had a baby."
No.
And I'm like, "What?" And they're like, "She didn't know she was pregnant. She was still having her period."
What?
The person who said it, who actually happened to be my wife, was actually right about that person being pregnant. They did look pregnant. She was 9 months pregnant.
No.
Had a stomach ache, went to the emergency room and said, "You're in labor."
Oh no.
Imagine there's a TV shows that's like, I didn't know I was pregnant. How do you go to bed? I remember my wife going to bed, and when that baby gets to a certain size, when you lay still, they kick around like crazy. Like that's when they come around and come awake and shit like that. Like how do you not know?
They're preparing you for when they're born because then they're just going to be bugging you constantly when you're sleeping.
Just how do you not know that you're I just don't understand. I couldn't believe it. Like you looked pregnant. Everybody thought you were pregnant, and you thought you weren't. It was just wild. It was one of the craziest, best things I've ever heard. I was like, that can't be real. She thought she had stomach aches, but she didn't think she was pregnant. Like she was drinking. She got angry that my wife asked her when she was due. It was maybe the most incredible thing I've ever heard in my entire life.
So when are you gonna tell your wife that you had a love child that now has fetal alcohol syndrome?
And this is the other thing. The worst part is you have no time to prepare for the baby.
Oh God, no.
You don't have any baby stuff. Nobody bought you anything. You don't have any daycare. You just have a baby. It's like, no, what the fuck do I do now?
Man, that is a TV show. I don't like that.
Dumpster baby.
Whew. And on that note, if you'd like any comments pointed towards DJ, find us on Twitter at LoadedBox. Check out the website. We've got our podcast. We've got our blogs. We've got our fantasy rankings that we're about to update as soon as DJ gets done with his podcast and gets to work on them. LoadedBoxPodcast.com. Next episode, we'll be doing the same thing, but quarterbacks ranked 1 through 12. We're available everywhere you find podcasts: iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, YouTube. Be sure to subscribe, rate, and review. DJ, send us away.
Bye. Radio.com.
I was going to say that.